so lovely to have you join us today. We have been looking forward to this conversation for ages. So thank you for coming on the pod.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here. So thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure.
Now, you are Britain's very first widow coach, and you're making such a genuine difference to the lives of those grieving the loss of a spouse. And it's a really important topic. So it's great to have you join us. And I just want to start by talking a bit about your personal story and what led you to do the really important work that you do. Can you tell us a little bit about that day when you found out that life-changing news? And how did you even start to process what had happened?
It's a good question. How do you even start to process these things? That is the big question, isn't it? How do we do that? I'm not sure. It's a multitude of things, isn't it, that come into play. But it was back in September 2016, and I was married to Simon. I was 39. He was 43. We had two girls. They were 9 and 5. And one Sunday morning, he got up, he went out for his bike ride, which he tried to do a long one every weekend, had a big job, very stressful. And that was the last I saw of him in the morning. He was literally here for breakfast and gone for lunch. The next thing I knew was at 11:30, his friend that he'd gone cycling with was at my door telling me that he died. Like, what do you do? I don't like, it still sends a shiver down my spine now thinking about it. I immediately phoned my mum. Bless my mum. I was like, Mum, Simon's dead. You've got to come round. I was thinking about the children. You just, so much goes through your mind, right? You're just all over the place thinking, what do I do with this? What do I have to do next? Almost that practical kind of mode. Obviously, I had to tell my children their dad had died, which I did immediately. Didn't want to. I wanted to protect them. I remember saying to the police outside the house, because I didn't want them to come in. I didn't want that to be the memory for the girls. I don't really know why, but I didn't. And I remember saying to the police, I really wanted to see Simon. I almost had to see him to believe it, but it was a Sunday and I couldn't because he'd had to go to the coroner's office, and you can't see somebody in the coroner's office on a Sunday. So then I thought, okay, well, I'm just going to tell the girls Daddy's had an accident so that I don't have to tell them he's dead yet, because that's just awful. But the policeman was, bless him, through his own tears, to be fair, was, my biggest advice would be to tell them the truth. So I did, and not a pleasant thing to do at all, utterly heartbreaking. And then I had to go and tell his mum that her son had died. And then, of course, it kind of pans out, doesn't it, into everyone else you need to tell. And just shock. I just remember sitting in my dining room on that Sunday night with, bless, my whole family around me. I'm so fortunate. I am, honestly. It wasn't in lockdown. I live in the town that I grew up in. I've got my mum, my dad, my sister, my friends from school. The support I had, I don't think I'd be sat here now if I hadn't have had it, in all honesty. Not that I'd have taken my life or anything. I don't mean that, but just that support system that is so needed and so invaluable when you lose someone that you love, as you guys know. And I didn't know what to do. I was just sat there. I literally just sat there with all these people around me in shock. I didn't want to go to bed because I didn't want to wake up the next morning and face that. One hell of a journey. And of course, you've got the run up to the funeral, and that keeps you busy because you're kind of taken on this step-by-step process. So it's something to focus on, right? And then the funeral comes and goes. And I have to say, the day after the funeral, I vividly remember being one of the worst days in my grieving journey.
It's like a come down, isn't it? Because you've got the kind of all of the admin or the dead men, you've got the funeral, you've got to kind of tell people and invite them to the funeral, you've got all the logistics, and then you've got to get through the service. And I think the funeral service is a big realization, isn't it, as well? Like that that kind of, that it's almost like, yeah, like a come down, like a reality check. And
It
it's
is.
really, really hard. And like for you to go from not only having to cope with the fact that your husband is dead, but then all of a sudden find the right words to tell your two daughters, like, where do you even start with that? Because it's a difficult thing to deliver anyway, but then having no experience of it, I can imagine, like, how did you even know what to say to them or where to start?
Well, before Simon died, I was actually a nurse and a midwife, so I had actually delivered bad news to people before. Never anyone that obviously I was very close to. So I was fortunate in knowing that you have to use the words dead and died, because they get confused if you say, oh, they've passed away, or they've gone to sleep, or all these other kind of softer versions of it that we like to use because we don't like the words dead and died. So I was fortunate that I did have that, but again, the policeman reminded me of it, because I've got to be honest, in that moment that had all escaped me. I wasn't thinking straight or logically, and he did guide me and said, make sure that you are clear and use the words that make it clear to them. Otherwise, they make it up in their head.
Yeah.
And I know, we still had an incident with that, because a friend of mine, for some reason, she still really can't say the word dead or died. She always says passed away. And she's always used that. And I remember my youngest, when she was about 6, so probably a year after Simon died, she came into my room one morning and she felt a bit funny, and I could see she was a bit grey. And she said, oh, I feel a bit dizzy and funny. I said, it's all right, darling, just lie down on the bed. We'll put your legs up. Take a few deep breaths. I said, it looks like you might pass out, but it's okay. I'm here. But when I said passed out, she freaked out. She, oh my God, no, I don't want to die, mummy. No, I don't want to. And I didn't understand. I hadn't connected the dots.
Yeah.
But it soon became clear that she thought passing out was passing away and she was going to die. And so it is really important, isn't it, that we use the right language. But how harsh is it? It just feels so harsh and so brutal, doesn't it, to say to somebody, they've died, they've gone, they're dead. So yeah, I just said it as it was to them.
Yeah. I mean, it's not an easy conversation to have with anyone, let alone children, and you're dealing with your own grief on top of that, which we'll get into a little bit more. But I just want to jump back. You mentioned that you were well supported by your friends and family in the community there, but grief is lonely. So I want to know, even though you were well supported, how did loneliness show up for you? Because I know, you've lost the person that you've built your life with, your partner, you're confident, everything rolls into that role. So yeah, how did loneliness show up for you?
Loneliness is horrible. It just, I remember I turned 40 about 6 months after Simon died in the following April. And I had a big party. There was a lot of people there. And it's you can be surrounded, can't you? You can be absolutely surrounded by the people that love you most in the world and still feel incredibly lonely, even though you're not alone. And it's such a deep, cutting feeling. It's a real pining. It's a physical need, desire, urge for somebody, that person that you've lost. And there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can, and that's the brutal reality of it. I threw myself into social media. I started dating in the May after Simon died, because I was so lonely and I was so sad. And I very much looked outward to fill that void. I started going out at the weekends and being quite sociable, drinking, trying to escape my reality, the pain and the hurt. I went on dates to try and find somebody to help me feel less alone. I would spend a lot of time on social media. But do you know what? None of it really helps. Like, the loneliness is harsh. And for me, I think it's so important that you build that relationship with yourself. And you do have to get used to the loneliness and do things with that in that time that fill you up, that support you in some way, and don't drain you and take more out of you, which a lot of what I was doing was draining me. Um, but sitting with that pain and that hurt and that isolation is tough. I did reach out to organizations like Widowed and Young, because I needed to be around people that got it. And I think that is one of the biggest factors. I think that community, to normalize and validate what you're feeling, because like everything that you experience is just on the biggest level ever, and it's huge, and you're swamped by everything that's going on. You don't understand it. You're thrown into a world you don't recognize anymore. You don't feel like you fit in. Your friendships feel different. Your family feels different. Your social life is affected. Like every corner of your world, you don't have normal to go back home to anymore. And it is incredibly lonely, and it's incredibly hard. And I think it's normal for us to go out and try and fill that void and fix it externally. I do, until you reach a point where you go, this isn't actually filling that void, because nothing can. I've got to find a way of growing around this, and learning to like me and understand me and who I am and what I need in this time, which is hard, and it takes a lot of time, and patience is huge, isn't it, in grief? Not something that we have a lot of, I don't think, in this day and age.
It is, and it's hard to sit with your pain, and it's hard to look inwards and ride through that immense hurt and pain. And I'd love to know two things. What helped you when you decided it was time to stop looking outward and to turn inward to help you move forward? And also, you mentioned just then that relationships change, friendships change, your social situation changed, and I'd love to know more about that as well, because that's an area that's huge when you lose somebody, but also when you lose your significant other. And I'd love to know how you cope with that.
That was tough, and it's like it's like more loss, actually, because you've lost your person, you lose your sense of self, your confidence, and that impacts your relationship with others. And that's really hard, because as well, sometimes you find yourself resenting the people that you love, that love you, that are there for you. Sometimes you're looking at them, friends would come to my house and they would be so kind. They'd bring me food, they spend the evening with me, and then they'd go home, they'd go back to their normal, to their husbands, to their families. And in those moments, I resented them. All these uncomfortable, messy feelings would bubble up inside of me. And then I judge myself harshly and think, Karen, that like you're being really unkind. You're being cruel. Like, don't be that person. I was so scared of my grief turning me into this bitter, angry, resentful person, that every time I experienced any of those emotions or feelings, I was straight on it, and I was judging it, and I was fighting it, rather than understanding actually it's normal. It's normal. It's part of your grieving process. It doesn't make you a bad person. You're not going to feel like this forever. But you don't know that at the time, do you? It feels permanent. It feels like you're forever changed into that version of yourself. And that's uncomfortable. And I think I had to kind of be honest with some of my friends and share how I was feeling, because they don't know. How can they know? They don't know that everything feels different to you now, and you can't connect with them on the same level. What you had in common before, the things that you shared, those lived experiences, they're not there for me anymore. I can't sit and complain about my husband because he's dead. And actually, when you sit and complain about your husband because he's gone off to work away for the week, quite frankly, I just want to punch you in the face, because, like, really, I don't care that he's going to come back.
Yeah.
And so there came a point where I had to open up to the people that I had the close enough connection with. Some relationships I lost along the way, and they did fizzle out. Some came back again after a few years. I made new relationships with new people. But God, it's so hard that you have to find new ways almost of connecting with the people that you have in your life, and navigating that way forward to finding out who you are. And I think going back to Sal's original question of how did I do that, I had to invest in me. after about 2.5 years of going out, of drinking, of dating, partying, and realizing none of it worked, I decided to invest in me, which wasn't a comfortable choice, because when do we ever invest in us? When do we ever sort of put our money on the table and kind of go, this is about me. This is what I need to do to help me. We don't. It's always about everyone else. So it was a bit of a leap of faith. I invested in a life coach, didn't even know what a life coach was at that point. I thought, what's that? That's got to be an American thing. And you know what? Within 6 months, I'd just completely and utterly turned my life around. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't perfect. I hadn't solved all my problems. I wasn't sort of jumping through hoops and feeling amazing, but I had some clarity. I had confidence. I understood who I was. I'd worked on my values, my strengths, my weaknesses, all those sort of characteristics that we have in life and how they serve us. Mm-hmm. What served me, what didn't, what helped me, what supported me. And that it was at that point that I just did completely understand more about myself and my grieving journey and where I was heading to in life and what I wanted.
Good on you. I'm bloody proud of you for doing that and investing in yourself. And it's not easy when you're grieving, but it's also not easy when you're a single mum raising 2 kids as well, like to set aside any sort of time for yourself. So I'm so glad to hear that you're able to get to that place. And another big topic that we know affects many widows and widowers is secondary losses and all of the other things that you're grieving. You're not just grieving the death of your person, you're grieving so many other things. So can you share a little bit about your experience with secondary losses?
Oh my God, you know what? They just keep coming when you...
Where do you begin?
Seriously. It honestly is everything. It comes down to the practicalities of life, the finances, your income. Your person's roles and responsibilities. For me, another secondary loss was my career. I was a nurse and a midwife. I wasn't able to go back after Simon died because I wasn't capable of being safe in my practice. And actually, after 6 months, I thought, I was very fortunate in that I was able to kind of say, I'm going to take 2 years to just focus on myself and the girls and get through our grief, that those first 2 years of our grief, and support them and be there for them. But that was huge. That was a huge loss for me. I was so proud of that. When people said to me, what do you do? I was like, I'm a midwife. I work for the NHS. And they've always prompted amazing conversations. And now people are saying, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I'm at home with my kids. do you know?
Yeah.
It felt massive. Holidays, Christmases, just day-to-day shopping, living, paying the bills. Do you know, again, the relationships comes back to that, your social life, intimacy, the cuddles, the love, the affection that you get from your person. They are endless. And as you keep moving through your grief, they do keep coming, because you've got the loss of your future, your hopes, your dreams. You're the sole memory holder now. All the things that you did with your person, and you have those conversations that you kind of, do you remember we did this? Well, where were we? And you haven't got that person to say that to anymore and share those things with. And you just, like I say, as you keep moving through your grief, you keep going, oh, there's another one. Oh, I haven't got that anymore. I don't have the answers to this, or I don't know what to do with that. And I'm never going to be able to achieve that with my person. So they're really hard. They're really hard. They're like constant reminders and triggers, aren't they, to what you've lost.
So incredibly hard. And I think a lot of them can be quite logistical as well. Like you said, it's your job and then finances and all of those things. For anyone listening who might be navigating that at the moment, is there anything that really helped you deal with some of those logistical secondary losses?
Well, help. Do you know, I think it's so hard, isn't it? Because we feel like such a burden. We feel like such a burden. We don't like asking for help. We want to be independent. We want to do it by ourselves. And, and I always say to people in my community, you're not a burden, you have a burden. And it's okay to ask people to help you carry that burden for a while. And when it comes to the practical things, reach out. People want to help and they don't know how to. And I think if we can help them to help us, it helps everyone. And that feels rubbish, right? I get it. It does feel rubbish that whilst I'm trying to navigate all this, I've also got to think about how other people can help me. Surely they should just know, they should understand. It's not difficult. I don't even know what I want sometimes. Should somebody just come and give me the answers and do the things for me? It's more frustration. But actually, if we can reframe it and think, right here, right now, in this season of my life, I need a little bit of help. And people want to help me. They don't know how. And that's not their fault, because we do live in a grief illiterate society, don't we? We shy away from it. We don't really know what helps others. So, again, I was really lucky. My sister had created a WhatsApp support group. I wasn't in this group, but if I ever spoke to anybody and mentioned that I needed something doing, somebody would go into that group and say, this needs doing. Anyone got any help, advice, support, whether it was finances, jobs around the house, booking holidays, anything, picking up the kids, getting me to appointments, speaking to a solicitor. Do you know, because they're quite big, scary things on your own. And it would go into this group and somebody would say, I can help with that. Some of my friends' husbands were brilliant at helping me with the financial side of things and making decisions with, people I trusted and could go to. I had a financial advisor as well, which was really helpful. But it's not expecting yourself to do it all. When you lose a life partner, it really is sort of double the workload and half the workforce. And we expect ourselves to do our role that we always did before. We then take on our person's roles and responsibilities that they had in the relationship. And then you've got grief, which is a full-time job all by itself, right?
Amen.
And there's no days off. Yeah. So I kind of go, don't expect yourself to do it all. That's not kind. That's not being compassionate to you and your needs. Reach out, ask for the help. People will want to help you.
Yes.
Great advice.
Self-compassion is allowing yourself to be vulnerable, right? And to ask for help. And sometimes we don't know how to do that, but it can be just simple as being like, I really don't know what to do. Yeah. I just need somebody to step in for me, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I love what you said as well. We're not a burden, we have a burden. Is that what you said, right? That's great. Because we do feel
quote
like
of the
burdens.
week, that is, Karen.
I love that. That's going on a quote on Insta. But we do, we all feel like burdens. I had a friend call me today and she was going through a bit of stuff and she was just, sad on the phone and she kept apologizing. She's like, I'm so sorry for calling you. I don't want to feel like a burden. I'm like, please call me anytime you feel like this. I want to help. People want to help. We put it on ourselves to think that nobody wants to help us. So I'm just not going to bother anyone with what's going on. But yeah, I love that. I love that quote. And Karen, you have two beautiful daughters who are also grieving the loss of their dad. How the bloody hell did you cope with the demands of single parenting and also managing their grief on top of your own?
Do you know what? It's so hard. And I recently did a podcast on this myself, parenting whilst grieving, because it is hard. It's finding the balance between showing your children your grief to normalize it for them, because that they are experiencing what you're experiencing, and they don't have the mental capabilities to put that into words, to articulate what's going on for them. They can't make sense of it. So as much as, yes, I would cry in front of them, I would share with them how I was feeling, I also didn't want them to see me when I was collapsed on the kitchen floor one night. And I know that sounds really dramatic, but that's grief. I just remember I was in the kitchen, I'd been fighting it all day, and all of a sudden, and it just comes out. And I was making these horrible noises. I was in a heap on the floor. and I didn't know what to do. And I remember just calling a friend going, can you come round? I need you to just sit with the kids or do something with the kids, because I'm in this mess. I don't think I made a lot of sense, but you don't want them to see you in that state, because that's scary for them. But you want them to see that you're sad so that it normalizes it for them. So whilst trying to let a bit out, but not all of it out, like, it just feels impossible at times. And you can sense that, you know, that they're you know, walking around the supermarket, you're driving somewhere in the car and a song comes on, and it just all of a sudden this wave washes over you, and the kids are in the car and you're trying to function normally, and the tears are streaming whilst you're trying to fight it, and the kids are like, what's wrong, mummy? And you're like, I just feel a bit sad. And then you can see that they don't really know what to say or do. My children grieve very, very differently. My eldest just almost felt like she had to step up, I think, and look after me and be another adult in the house and help me bring up my youngest daughter. And she didn't want to add any extra pressure onto me by showing me her grief. So she very much put up a barrier and didn't talk about it. Just didn't. She never. I have to say, it's only in the last year or so, and I'm coming up 7 years, that she started to say to me, I miss Dad. I miss him, and it's sad. And so really, you know, for nearly 6 years, she never cried. She never said, I miss him. She never let it all out and went, this is rubbish, I want my daddy, and nothing. There was no expression. My youngest, God, you know, in the early days, I couldn't comfort her. It was just oozing out of everything. And I couldn't calm her down, but I would lean on family and friends, but we've got charities in the UK, Winston's Wish. I know there's others as well, Child Bereavement UK, but I use Winston's Wish. They were based near where I live. And they had a line that you could call 24/7. And the amount of times I did, you know, and they were brilliant at giving me tips. And I think one of the best things, I think two things actually, the school gave the children a card that just had a picture of a home on it and said, if you're ever in school and you feel funny and you want to go home, you don't have to say anything, just show me this card and I will phone your mum and she can come and pick you up and you can go home. And I think that they never used it. But I think they knew that it was there and it was safe for them. Do you know? And I think that's so comforting for children. So that was amazing. But also having something tangible for children. With my youngest, when she would just lose herself in her grief and I couldn't comfort her, I couldn't cuddle, she would fight me and she was screaming. It was horrible. And I didn't know what to do. But they said to me, create a box. So I had in this box some cards that the girls had written to their dad, cards that the dad had written to the girls, some of his handwriting, his watch, his wedding rings. We had a lock of his hair, pictures, a jumper, just stuff that she could, and it worked. It was like magic. I would just take her when she started to break down, we'd go and sit down, I'd put some music on. She loved the song that we played at the funeral, Caravan of Love, and she'd like play the song, we'd put the song on and she would just sit and go through this box and she'd calm down. And she would just sit and we'd talk about him. And it was like, wow, I would never have thought that would be the thing that helped, but it really did. And I think it's the co-regulation, isn't it? It's the sitting with them and just calming yourself down. I think the more uptight you're all getting and the more upset you're all getting, you just feed each other. So I think it's really helpful to learn some things, that either getting out, being in nature, going for a walk, putting some music on, breathing, calming yourselves down. I think things like that are really helpful as well. But what works for one child won't work for another. So you're forever just like trying all these different techniques and tools to try and gain some normality in your home whilst navigating everyone's grief. And I find it hard because I'm a very open person, as you can tell. I just talk. And I will share how I'm feeling. My eldest, because she's shut down, we clashed because I couldn't get through to her. And that was really difficult for me. But she found my openness uncomfortable. So it's really tricky terrain to navigate, you know, and there's no dressing up. And again, I think you have to ask people for help. You have to keep the lines of communication open. And for me, I think spending time with and I was really fortunate that I could take that time off work and be with them as much as I could. in between trying to sort myself out as well, and trying to have some fun. As much as those first 2 years were horrendous, and they really were, that, I always refer to the first 2 years as the early days, the hardest. But, it doesn't mean it just suddenly gets easier after 2 years and it's all sorted. But I think it's those early 2 years. I also had some amazing times. We achieved some incredible things. We went to Disneyland, we went to Lapland and saw Father Christmas. We had an amazing family holiday. I learned to tow the caravan all by myself. We went off and did that together. We had amazing days out. We went to London and did the open top bus. So as much as it was horrendous, I really love to just highlight, actually, amongst the hurt and the pain and the heartache, you will be making some memories as well that you will take forward with you. And I now look back on some of those times, even in those first very early days, those first 2 years, and they bring a smile to my face. And I kind of go, do you know what? That was amazing. And that was lovely, actually, as well as acknowledging that it was properly horrendous as well.
It's a real paradox, isn't it? And I think in the early days, you think, how can I possibly ever feel happy again? But actually, grief and joy can coexist. And some people in the early stages might think that sounds absolutely bonkers. But you're right. Like, there are moments when you look back and think there were light moments throughout that really dark time too.
Yeah. And I think you have to look for the good. You do, however dark it gets and however hard it gets. And I'm not saying this, I don't want this to sound like sort of that toxic positivity where you can't acknowledge the hurt and the pain. I'm really not. I think it's important to learn to sit with that, like you say, and to face it. But I think also to allow yourself to look for the good, to acknowledge what feels good to you in your situation. I did a retreat last weekend for widows here in the UK, and I was sat chatting to one of the ladies, and she said, she started off a sentence saying, I'm really grateful for, and then she stopped herself, went, oh no, I can't say grateful. I'm not grateful. And I said, you can say you're grateful. It's really important to acknowledge the loss and the heartache and the hurt and the despair and the fear and the anxiety, but also what is still good? What are you grateful for amongst your darkness? Because, my God, it just helps us find our way through and allow us to recognize, like you say, that the paradox, the two live side by side, and they're both necessary in your healing journey. You can't sit in either space permanently. It's finding that balance.
Totally. And I think also when we're grieving, I think sometimes we feel like we can't say we're grateful for something, that we should always be in that space of like, there's nothing to be grateful for, everything's shit. And some people are in that space. But I think we feel like if we say something like, oh, I appreciate that, or I'm grateful for this, it's almost like it moves into the space of toxic positivity. But Dr. Lucy Hone talks about being grateful and thinking about the good things is how you build resilience in difficult times. But it's a tricky one, I think, for grievers. We feel like if we say, oh, I'm grateful for something, that people are going to think, right, you don't really like that. We don't have a right to be grateful. So it's really important that you raise that point. And you mentioned just then that you did a widow's retreat recently. So tell us, what made you decide to become the UK's first widow coach? Because it's pretty awesome. And can you also tell us, what are some of the really common things that you see from your clients?
So the reason I started was I'd obviously been through my own journey, and I'd been out there looking for support, which I'd found peer support, and it was brilliant. But I wanted more. I really want, how do I build that resilience? How do I create a life that can feel good again for myself? I was very determined after Simon died. This was not going to have a negative impact on us for the rest of our lives. This wasn't going to define us. I didn't want to become a victim of life, nor the girls. And I didn't know how I was going to do that. So I thought, right, I've got to find a way. I've got to figure this out. Obviously, when I'd invested in myself and had my own life coaching and discovered all these tools that I could use, like allowing myself to use the word grateful, allowing myself to look for the good, and building that resilience and working on connections, finding my way forward, creating what felt good for me. I thought, do you know what? If I can do this, I'm just a normal person, living a normal life. So can everyone else. And I thought, I want to share it. And I just started off talking to people here in my office, at home, in the garden, and helping people locally. But actually, lockdown came along, and then I discovered Zoom, and it kind of went global. And I now support people all over the world because it's so important to me. It's become a passion of mine, and it's my absolute life's purpose to give people the tools, to understand how they can rebuild again, reimagine a life after loss that can still be beautiful. Yes, it'll be different. Of course it will, but different doesn't mean bad. And allowing themselves to do that whilst working through the guilt and the fear and the anxiety and the self-doubt, all those things that impact us, and helping them make choices that serve them. So, it's just now I love doing it. I love bringing people together. Do you know what's really magic? When you bring people together that are going through something similar. Now, it's not the same. We all do this in our own unique ways. But when you bring widows together, something magical happens. It really does. And being part of that and witnessing that is just the best feeling in the world, because you all come together and you share and you grow and you support, and you're there to bolster each other up and cheer each other on, knowing that somebody else gets it. You're not being judged. A bit like you said, you worry about if you say the word grateful or I'm pleased or I'm happy, or you show that you're having fun in some way. What will people think? Surely I've got to be dark and depressed and crying all the time. But when you're with other widows and maybe you do have a laugh, it's lots of fun. We laughed so much at the retreat last weekend. But that they're not just seeing that thing. That the people around you understand that underneath all of that is still a lot of sadness. You asked me another question and I've forgotten it, Sally. Sorry.
Oh, that's all right. I love my double questions. It's I'd love to know what some of the common themes that you see from clients. Like, is there something that a lot of people come to you struggling with, or find difficult to cope with when they're widowed?
Yeah, definitely. Loneliness, absolutely. Disconnect, just feeling like they don't fit in a world anymore. Like we were saying about how all our relationships are impacted when you lose a life partner. You just don't know where you sit in the life that you had, not knowing where you're heading, not knowing who you are, what it is you want, feeling like half of you has died alongside your person. Not having the confidence in yourself to make choices and decisions, not understanding the grief. Grief is huge and it's scary, and there's people don't really talk about it, right? So they're not understanding what they're experiencing, and it is that self-judgment and that self-criticism is absolutely huge in people, and really helping them to reframe a lot of their thoughts, their beliefs. I say it's almost like unlearning everything you thought you knew and relearning a completely new way, and helping people go through that process. And I think, just helping them trust in themselves again, cultivate that inner belief that, do you know what, I may not have all the answers, because you don't. You have a lot of questions and no answers, and people we want the answers. We want to know where. We don't like uncertainty. What's on the other side of the uncertainty. It's scary. We want to know exactly where we're heading and exactly where we're going. And it is, helping them understand that you will figure this out. It's like a mantra in my community. I don't know yet, but I will figure it out. And maybe the answers won't come exactly when I demand them or need them or ask of them, but they will come. And this is what I say to everyone, and I think it's really important. You have everything you need within you. Like we all do, right? We do have the answers. We do have the capacity to find our way through great tragedy and trauma in life, Doesn't feel like that. It really doesn't feel like that. And I felt that too. I was like, I can't do this. Nothing's ever going to feel the same again. And I hear that so much. And, my life isn't going to ever be good. What's the point? It can. It'll take a long time. It does take work and effort. you can create something alongside your grief. And I'd say really that for the most part, it's the disconnect. And I think that's why it's so powerful bringing people together into these communities, because it helps with all of those factors.
Community is everything. It's something that has just helped Sal and I both so much. And just, thanks for sharing so many great messages there as well. But back on the gratitude point, like gratitude is something that actually got me through. And every morning when I'd wake up and I'd be like, my mum's dead, what's the fucking point of anything? I would write down 3 things that I was grateful for that would get me out of bed, because nothing else was going to get me out of bed. So I think gratitude can be really a really helpful tool in grief, at finding the light in the dark days. And I love something that Julia Samuel told us when we interviewed her, and she explained that like hope is something that you have to cultivate, like it's a plan, and you have to believe that you can get there. And I love that, so for the days when people are feeling really hopeless and like there is no point and nothing is ever going to get better again, like you can kind of switch your mindset into believing that it can. And I think that's really important for people to do when you are in the depths of grief.
Yeah.
It's almost like a learned skill, isn't it? Like having
Yeah.
that hope, that resilience, like it's a muscle that we have to build.
It is. And I love Julia Samuel. She's amazing, isn't she? I'm always saying to people, go follow her.
Queen of grief.
Yes, it is. But, hope on its own isn't enough, is it? You have to take action, and I think, guilt's another big one, isn't it? That comes up for us all. We feel guilty that we're here and we get to live, and that we want to live again after our person's died. Like, what gives us that right? But like you say, just having that hope within you that you can do it. And I think when you bring people together and you see that others have found that, that healing in community, I think is really important. Having like that open heart and open minds to new ways, to new possibilities, to new ideas, to a new life ahead of you. But also, that personal development side and empowering yourself to find your way through it. It's not easy work. It's not easy work, but it's little things. And gratitude can feel like a big word. You said there, Im, about, writing down 3 things I'm grateful for. Sometimes that can feel big. And I remember David Kessler said when I did his Grief Educators program, sometimes that can feel too big. Sometimes focus on the wins, that can feel like more achievable depending on where you are in your grief journey. And actually those wins will turn into gratitude. But those little things that you kind of go, that feels like a win, that feels like something that I can feel pleased about today, here and now in my journey.
Totally. And sometimes it's getting out of bed, putting one foot in front of the other, right? Like that is a win.
Having a shower.
Having a shower, honestly, like small things like that, like just going micro. And Karen, like often with like grievers can face societal expectations that we should be moving on at a certain, pace, or that we should be grieving in a certain way. And you mentioned earlier that relationship dynamics change, and also there can be expectations of others on how we move forward. You said also that you did throw yourself into dating and then you pull back a little bit. Have you dipped your toe back in the dating pool? Did you find that there were lots of kind of societal expectations on you? How did you navigate them? Can you tell us a little bit about what your experience has been like post kind of doing the inner work when it comes to dating?
Yeah, so I pulled back from online dating, and I met somebody at an event that I did with a friend. We were raising some money for Winston's Wish, and I met him there. He came with his brother. So we met very organically, which was lovely, actually. And we're still together now. It's been 4 years, and it's been incredible. There are expectations from society, but I think we take them on ourselves as well a little bit, and we place them on ourselves, which in some respects I think are a little bit more challenging because we're not always aware of the expectations that we place on ourselves. And dating's really difficult because I think there's that fear of judgment, isn't there? But like I always say to people, you're kind of damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. You know, if you don't meet somebody else and you dedicate the rest of your life to your person, then they're like, oh, you know, she's being miserable, she's wallowing in it, she's not moving on. Like, and then they've got all these sort of assumptions of how you're dealing with it. And then if you do meet somebody else, they're like, oh, she got over that quite quickly, didn't she? She's moved on. She doesn't love him anymore. So you almost like can't win. And I think for us as well, when we decide that we want to cultivate a new relationship and grow something with somebody, it's hard and it was certainly hard for me, and I hear it a lot in my community, understanding how you love two people, because it's you don't stop loving your person that died. Whereas often when a relationship breaks down, that you know, and you get divorced or you split up or whatever, and I'm not comparing, but for the most part you tend to fall out of love with that person, is my understanding of it. I could be wrong, but when somebody dies, you don't fall out of love with them. And how do you then fall in love with somebody else and make space for it both? And it's really hard to understand even when you're going through it. But, you know, I think there comes a point where you have to look at what you're afraid of other people judging you for and the expectations they're placing on you. And, you know, are they fair? Are they real? Is it true? Are you assuming that others are placing these? Because a lot of people come to me and say, oh, you know, I feel like, you know, they're expecting this of me and that of me. And I say, but why do you feel that? Is it because it's something that they've said or done? Or are you making an assumption about what they're expecting of you? Do you know? And we've got to be really careful of that, because we make a lot of stuff up, don't we, in our heads? And then I kind of turn it and like, is that an expectation that you have on yourself, maybe, that there's some pressure coming from within? So I think it's always interesting to get curious about these expectations that we believe others have, and also assess the expectations that we have on ourselves, and always just meet everything with that compassion, like you would a best friend. You know, it's so simple, but it's not easy to do. Like the idea of it, the theory is simple, isn't it? Just be kind to yourself, talk to yourself like you would a best friend. But we're not used to having that internal dialogue, that compassionate voice in our head. So a lot of it comes down to an awareness, but also just, again, the confidence to understand that you know what you need and follow your heart. And I always get this expression mixed up, but I love it. Those that matter don't mind, and those that mind don't matter.
Yes.
Because it's just so true. You know, the people close enough to you that understand, they won't mind. They'll support you, whatever you do, you know. And the others, people are going to think, people are going to judge. It's human nature. And I think you have to get to a point where you go, it's okay, I'm going to let them, because I'm doing what feels good to me. And I know in myself that the choices I'm making are supporting me. They're kind to me. And I have people around me that understand that and care. And that's good enough.
Great advice. And this topic comes up a lot within our community, mainly I think from the kids of the parents who are now in new relationships. But how did your girls cope with that transition of you moving into a new relationship? Did they find it really difficult? How did you tell them?
So my youngest was all up for it. She was she quite quickly after Simon died was like, Mummy, when am I going to have a new daddy?
Oh, wow.
I remember we were in the supermarket once and somebody was helping me pack my bags, you know, at the end of the counter. I think, you know, I was struggling with it all. And she just sort of went, Mummy, why don't you marry him? He's nice. It was just so embarrassing. I was like, oh, well, enough. I was like, I'm sorry about my daughter. So when I met Andy, she loved it. She craved that male companion, you know, presence in her life. And she was, how old would she have been? 8, I think. And she was quite little, and he would carry her, and she loved it, absolutely loved it. My eldest was more reserved, I think. worried. Between the three of us, we'd created such an amazing bond. We'd done amazing things. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't perfect. We fought and we all drove each other mad, and that's life, right? But there was also this connection that was strong, that was real, and I was their only parent. And I think they'd become so used to it being the three of us, three odd years in a child's life. It's a long time, isn't it? And they felt safe. And I think my eldest was worried that Andy would come into our lives and change everything and take me away from them, and I wouldn't be around for them as much as I was. And she was scared of the change that would bring. So she was quite resistant. We had to be very gentle with her. And I had to, and I got it a bit from my mother-in-law as well. Don't get me wrong, she was amazing, but I think there was that real fear of change. And if I met somebody else, what impact is that going to have on everyone's life? Is Simon going to be forgotten? Are we going to have to take down all the pictures? Are you guys going to just create this life and we're not going to be as significant in yours? So it took a lot of reassurance and a lot of love that Andy isn't replacing Daddy or Simon. He's a wonderful man. He's gentle. I had to reassure, especially my eldest, that she would always be my priority. Always be my first port of call in life, to make sure everything was okay. And nobody would ever take that away. And if she wasn't ever happy with anything, I was absolutely 100% there for her. So I think you have to be gentle, you have to be understanding, and you have to be very reassuring that you're still 100% there for them. That's what my children needed, and now, it works. It's lovely, and I feel safe in a world that I never thought I'd feel safe in again, and I feel loved in a way that I never thought I'd feel loved again, and it's lovely, and I'm very, very blessed and very grateful for all of that, because I know it's not easy.
We are so happy to hear you say that, Karen, and thank you so much for joining us and sharing all of your amazing nuggets of wisdom. I can see why you're an amazing coach. Just so many helpful things that hopefully anyone listening who's coping with, the loss of a partner or spouse, or just in grief in general, will have lots of comfort and lots of amazing takeaways. And I think we've definitely got a few quote tells that are going to be coming in hot from this conversation. Hey, Im.
Going to keep me busy on the old Canva for sure.
And Karen, for anyone listening who wants to find out more about what you do or connect with you, can you tell us where they can find you?
Sure. I mean, I've got my website, karensutton.co.uk, or I'm on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok even.
Oh, TikTokers. Oh, yes, Karen.
We'll have to follow you.
Are you on Threads, or is that a step too far?
I haven't, no.
It's too much, isn't it? It's too much.
Yeah.
So yeah, anywhere you can find me. I've also got my own podcast, the Widow Podcast, as well, which I know helps people immensely.
It's a brilliant podcast. So go and check that out. And we will add some of these resources in the show notes as well for our listeners, so they can find you easily. And thank you for your time. It's just been amazing chatting to you. So many quotes, so inspiring, and we've just loved every minute of it.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. It's been lovely.